Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this fireside chat that we have today with Camelback Ventures. We're really excited to be working with Camelback Ventures as an organization. Camelback Ventures does phenomenal things around identifying, developing, and promoting early stage underrepresented entrepreneurs with really the aim to increase individual community education and generational wealth. So they're doing phenomenal work in the community and really promoting more representation in the community of entrepreneurs and the community of tech. So we're really excited to be aligned with their goals and working to develop a strong partnership in a number of different ways. So today we have a number of folks from Camelback Ventures here. We have Aaron Walker, who is the CEO, and then we have Reuben, Jerelyn, and Jessica, who are all fellows with Camelback Ventures, who are entrepreneurs and working closely with this organization. The three that we have here today are just three of over 85 fellows that work with Camelback to do phenomenal work and to really build out new organizations. So I'm going to pass this over to Aaron to facilitate a great conversation so we can learn more about Camelback Ventures as an organization. We can learn more about the work of these wonderful entrepreneurs and how they benefit and work with Camelback and what the future of this looks like. So thank you to all of you for being here today. We're really excited about the partnership that we have between Snowflake and between Camelback, and really looking forward to sharing more about your organization and your work with our team here at Snowflake. So Aaron, I'm going to pass it over to you.
It's been a pleasure working with you all over the last year and excited for this conversation with three Camelback fellows. So just to give some quick background for those who are unfamiliar, Camelback is an organization that seeks to increase opportunity for entrepreneurs of color and women by investing in their ventures and their leadership while advocating for fairness in their funding. And our ultimate vision is to seek solutions by investing in undervalued entrepreneurs with the belief that by doing so, we can create livable communities and wealth for future generations to inherit. So excited to be able to share with you a little bit more about what we do by showing you who our fellows are. I think that's the best way to do that. And so would love for Jessica, Reuben, and Jerelyn just to take a second to introduce themselves and the organizations, and then we'll jump into a conversation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Santana. I'm co-founder and CEO of America on Tech. America on Tech is a national nonprofit organization on a mission to decrease the racial wealth gap in underestimated communities by creating pathways for young people to thrive in degrees and careers and technology. Our organization started in 2014, and we've worked with more than 3,500 young people over the last 7 years. 85% of our young people end up in computer science, 2-year or 4-year college or university programs, or are actually working in the industry. The other 15%, 10% of them are employed, and 5% of them just actually don't fill out our surveys. So we don't know where they've ended up. And I think Jerelyn and Reuben will probably can share a little bit more about data and stuff like that, because I think it's something that we all run into in the nonprofit space. This work has really come from a place of passion. I was working in the private sector in technology for companies like Deloitte and Accenture, and saw how talent strategies oftentimes leave Black and brown young people out of the equation. And I do believe that we're in a time where we need to have alternative pathways for young people to be able to thrive economically. We really see a career mobility, career advancement, and economic mobility as a social justice issue. So we see that the work that we're doing, one of the outcomes is diversity in technology, but for us, we're really committed to making sure that our work is really about economic and social justice. So really, really nice to be with you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Reuben Ogbonna. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Marcy Lab School. We're an alternative college based in Brooklyn, New York. We're setting out to solve the problem of the student loan debt crisis, the college persistence crisis, and our view of the world is that higher education in general has done a poor job of serving those students who are underrepresented or come from low resource communities. In 1 year, as opposed to 4, our students go through an industry-informed curriculum on computer science and software engineering. And at the end of our program, they take on full-time jobs at our partners, such as Spotify, Squarespace, the New York Times, and JP Morgan. At the end of our one-year program, our students on average earn about $103,000 per year, with salaries going up to $190,000 at the age of 19 and 20. We're super excited about the way that that allows them to build wealth for themselves and their families and skip over the parts that most people have to go through of navigating debt, obligations that come with later age. We think part of solving the wealth crisis, the wealth gap, is to get wealth in the hands of our young people in our communities at an earlier age. And we're super excited to do that. It's a pleasure to meet you all, and excited to dive into this conversation.
Yes, thanks so much for having all of us. My name is Jerelyn Rodriguez. I'm the co-founder and CEO at the Knowledge House. We are headquartered in the South Bronx, and we specialize in code and design job training for youth and young adults. So we serve both high school students and adult job seekers to close what we call the leaky tech pipeline. And we specialize in teaching data engineering, full stack web development, cybersecurity, and UX UI. 75% of our students traditionally get their first job in tech after our programs, and we're really excited that for this current cohort during COVID year, 90% of them are currently working in internships or full-time roles as engineers. So we're really excited about our improvement. And this year we are expanding nationally and reaching Newark, Los Angeles, and Atlanta. And I started this work because college worked for me, but it did not work for a lot of my peers and family members growing up in the Bronx. And I wanted to make sure that everyone had access to high-paying jobs, especially in tech, where we know almost half of them don't require a bachelor's. And so I'm excited to keep the work going, right? Especially as we recover from COVID, digital skills training is more important than ever. And so I'm really, really excited to be working with Reuben and Jessica to expand our efforts. And thanks to Camelback for all of your support.
Excellent. Well, thank you for those introductions. And Jerelyn, I think that was a good segue into the place where I want to start this conversation. You know, because you were just talking about your motivation for starting the Knowledge House. And I know that for me, part of my motivation starting Camelback was just knowing that there were really talented entrepreneurs of color out there who weren't being given the same opportunities to launch ventures that were going to have an impact on communities, and particularly communities of color. And that was a big motivation for me, just sort of seeing that all these ideas are touching folks of color, but the leaders oftentimes, or not enough times in my opinion, were folks of color. And so I would love for us to just sort of build on that, like what for you, Jessica or Reuben, to start motivated you to start your company, and what also motivates you to keep going?
You know, so I think that I want to actually start off as being a young person. I think, you know, I fell into technology and it was something that I got into because I started coding on MySpace.com when I was a young person, and it became a side hustle for me in high school. And so I was charging people $25 to give them custom MySpace pages. But at the time, I actually didn't know there was a career in this industry. And I also didn't know how much money was actually generated by people who actually obtained jobs in this industry. So having graduated from New York City public schools and, you know, having gone to be the first person in my family to graduate from college and pursue a career in technology, my first job offer was about 6 times my family's household income. You know, my mom and dad raised us on an income of no more than $20,000 a year. And my first job in technology was paying me well above 6 figures. And at that time, you know, working in the private sector, looking around and seeing that there were not a lot of Black and Latinx professionals, I had really big questions about how I personally got into technology, and yet so many young people in the community that I'm from don't necessarily have those same opportunities. When I thought about my career trajectory, there wasn't any computer science in my classrooms in K through 12. And when you look at the numbers, you know, Black and Latino students are 7 times to 8 times more likely to go into this field if they're actually exposed to it within very critical years, like their high school years. So the fact that our schools are not teaching it, we don't have a teacher workforce that is actually capable to executing that on the ground. And on top of that, there are not a lot of free programs that young people can participate in to gain these skills. I was very much motivated to start creating an ecosystem by which young people at an earlier age can actually start tinkering and building and creating products and services. You know, when we first started this organization, I think we were very much committed to ensuring that we expose as many Black and Brown youth as possible to participate in this industry. But as time has passed, you know, and our alumni started getting jobs and getting access into computer science, our work, you know, we really see it directly tied to economic mobility. And I know what that looks like because I know what it was like to go from, you know, having been classified as low income to then being able to obtain a job in a well-paying industry. Tech jobs are not going anywhere. You know, they're one of the top sources of new wages in the United States. And I think now more than ever before, we need to be positioning young people to actually compete fairly, not for the jobs of tomorrow, but definitely the jobs of today, because they're here and they're not going anywhere. And that's what keeps me motivated to continue to do this work.
Excellent. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, my Marcy Lab School journey started actually in the classroom. I spent the vast majority of my career as a K through 12 educator, mostly in middle schools and high schools, as a math teacher and a computer science teacher, as a dean and assistant principal. And most of that time was spent in New York's charter school sector. And public education in New York and in the charter school sector in specific has a very singular view on college as the one metric for success. College is embedded into the cultures of most of the schools that I've been a part of, even such that the rooms don't have numbers. You don't go to homeroom in room 704, 205. You go to homeroom at Morehouse College or Amherst College. From the time students are 5 years old, they're made to believe that if they can matriculate through this path that ends at a 4-year college, they'll be able to climb up the economic ladder. And I very much so believe that to be true. As a leader in these schools, I was able to say that 100% of my students were able to make it off to college at the end of 4 years at Coney Island Prep High School in one of the lowest income zip codes in Brooklyn, New York. We patted ourselves on the back. We were celebrated in our local press. And what I saw after the press went away and our students went off to college was that they had some really hard challenges to contend with. Many of our students got into the schools of their choice, but didn't receive enough financial aid to attend. And that's a very common problem that people don't talk enough about. When a student gets into their dream college and doesn't receive enough financial aid, they have two really poor choices. They could either A, choose to finance the gap between what they can pay and what college costs with student loan debt. I think we're very familiar with that crisis in this moment. That leaves a student in a really difficult situation. It's hard to counsel a student who wants to work in PR or who wants to work in nursing and has an opportunity to go to this college that she's always dreamed of, but it will require her to take out $40,000 in loans per year. And we know that that's more than what her family will make in a year. We also know that the entry-level salary prospects of that career path and what it will take to service $160,000 in loan debt, that math just doesn't add up. On the other hand, she can choose not to attend that college and choose to attend a local state or city university at a lesser cost. That's a decision that's financially responsible, more financially responsible than I would have been able to make at age 17 or 18. And so we can commend those students for thinking about the long-term implications of like the financial burden of college. But what they don't know is that by choosing not to attend their dream school and instead go to that local city or state option, they're less likely to meet recruiters from companies like Snowflake, for example. So they're handicapping their future earning potential in a different way. And I saw this happen over and over again. I saw so many of my students and family have to contend with this decision, and I just felt stuck. Like I didn't know which way to send the student, to debt or to a lower ceiling on their career trajectory. And year after year of seeing this, I got together with a couple of colleagues who later became my co-founders and board of directors. And we thought like, one, this is wrong. Two, we think students deserve better options. Three, we think we could provide that option. We thought that we could create a better version of college built from the ground up to serve students with a ton of potential, motivation, and possibility of success in their life, but with systemic barriers to the traditional system. We wanted to make the program quicker, 1 year instead of 4, because we knew that the data suggests that part of the reason why students from low-income communities will fail to persist in college because of the financial burdens that don't stop over the course of those 4 years as they stop for their peers. We wanted to make it practical. We knew our students didn't have the luxury of graduating from a post-secondary education without the skills necessary to compete for jobs in the market. 3, we wanted to ground it in networks and social capital, because we knew how we landed our first jobs. And those things are often taken for granted for students who come from families that don't have the same amount of social capital that their wealthier peers might have. We said, if we can put those things together, a really practical skills-based, in-demand skills-based post-secondary curriculum, and then pair that with a well-rounded civic studies curriculum that allows students to step into their own leadership and sense of identity, then we could create, in a fraction of the time, young adults who are every bit as competitive as those who come from the schools that you all are used to competing with, to recruiting from. And we started with a pilot in 2019 with 9 brave students who trusted us with their post-secondary education. And at the end of that 1 year that ended in a pandemic, we were incredibly proud, somewhat surprised at the types of job offers those 19 and 20-year-olds were able to pull down, and the companies that later came to call themselves partners. And we're motivated by what that means for students who are coming from other places, not like the Marcy Lab School. If our partners that are used to only recruiting at schools like NYU and Columbia and Tuck and Cornell and Rutgers, if those recruiting partners are now seeing students that come out of the Marcy Lab School as viable sources of talent, and that means the universe of opportunity for where else they can find talent is also increased. And we're excited about the way that might create opportunities for students that we might not even be able to touch.
You want to add to that, Jerelyn?
Sure. My background is a little different. I'm not a technologist. My background is in education and community organizing. 7 years ago, though, one of my last jobs before the Knowledge House was being a field director for Reshma Saujani's campaign for Public Advocate of New York City. This was back in 2012, and Reshma Saujani is also the founder of Girls Who Code. And so that was my introduction to the growing tech ecosystem in Uptown New York. I was organizing potential voters to support Reshma in the Bronx, and that's how I met my co-founder, Joe Carano. So he's our technical lead, and I got to see how he literally taught himself programming skills and went from a minimum wage job to almost 6 figures. And so I became very inspired to replicate that experience for the young people in the Bronx, and seeing, Reshma Saujani, a woman of color, advocate for diversifying STEM and spreading STEM education. I thought, if she could do it, I could do. And so 7 years ago, we launched this pilot that served 16 to 24-year-olds in the Bronx, taught them 3D printing, coding, etc. And so that program has now grown. We've served more than 2,000 folks in STEM education. And what keeps me going now is, like, we have had early successes, and we've been able to replicate my co-founder's experience for young people in the Bronx. But since COVID, applications for our programs have more than doubled. This was last year. This year, we had about 750 applications for 150 slots. And so just understanding, as Jessica said, like, this sector is really fail-proof, right? We know that today, 20% of all open jobs in New York City are tech jobs. And more than 50% of all jobs in New York City require some type of digital skills training. So the ability to just be responsive to the need is what keeps me going, because we want to make sure that we impact as many lives as possible, and starting in the Bronx and, going wherever we are needed. So very excited about our work and our growth.
Excellent. I think the stories that you all tell are beautiful and really ground us into why you all are doing this. And you also begin to touch on pieces of where you're going. And I'm curious for you all to share, this journey of being a founder in particular is a long and arduous one. Like, what are you most proud of at this point in your journey, and why?
I think that there are a lot of things that I can be proud of in this journey. One of the things I can be proud of is like making it this far, right? The numbers support that Black and Brown leaders who are launching ventures, a lot of times they don't survive past 3 or 4 years. And American Tech has been here for 7 years. And these 7 years haven't gone in vain. What makes me most proud outside of just being able to continue to do this work is actually having young people over the last 7 years saying, thank you, you were the reason why I got my first job, or thank you, you were the reason why I got my first paycheck, or thank you for showing me that I can do something that I don't usually see people like me being able to do. So honestly, for me, it is a lot of the things that I can't quantify that make me excited. I guess I can quantify student salaries and how much they are making, right? Which for us, the lowest reported salary at American Tech has been $75,000, and the largest reported salary has been like $250,000. So I think, for me, it is a lot of the things you can't qualify. It's like the moments when you spend with a young person and then they tell you how you've changed their life in a way that you never actually thought that as an entrepreneur, you'd be able to make that kind of impact. And I think, thinking about the last year, I think the last thing I'll say that I'm proud of is the way that we've pivoted. During COVID-19, our organization could have went down the drain. We could have raised no money. We could have lost young people along the process. And I would actually say what the pandemic did was force us to innovate and force us to get more creative about the way that we can serve young people outside of New York City and Los Angeles, which are our 2 current regions. And I'm just really excited and proud of what is to come for what we've learned over the last 7 years, and continue to bring these programs to communities that deserve them.
Go for it, Jerelyn.
I think for us, we also survived the pandemic. I think that is what I am most proud of 7 years later, just because when we started, we had people telling us, you're not gonna make it past year 2, you are not relevant, why are you doing this? You shouldn't even be teaching poor kids how to code, right? And like, the fact that I'm here with 2 other leaders and there's a lot more of us proving these people wrong is like so important, right? And so the fact that we have survived the pandemic and literally improved our outcomes, like we had the highest performing cohort during the pandemic, we're so proud of that. We also raised the most money last year, right? And so as Jessica mentioned, we were also a nonprofit. We could have shut down, right? We were planning to do payroll cuts. We were planning to just do contingency plans so that we can make it, but we ended up having the most successful year. And I think it's because as a leader, I have grown and like people have grown their trust in me over time, right? And so 7 years in, being a leader means empowering other people. And during moments of crisis, when your team, when your students, when your board literally trust you to like, other nonprofits are not surviving, we are counting on you to make sure that we have a good year, that means everything. And the gratitude that I hear from students, my staff, really is what keeps me going. And so just my ability to be able to empower my team so that one day in the future, we have a graduate that is taking over the Knowledge House, that is what I am most proud of. And so just understanding the trust that I have built on my team over time, that means everything, more than like the data points.
That's awesome. I echo everything that Jerelyn and Jessica said, and just want to reiterate that like something that makes us proud, makes me proud, is just helping young people step into financial independence. Like that feeling never gets old. Like you still never lose like the joy of seeing a young person get a job offer that fundamentally changes the trajectory of their entire family's life. That doesn't get old. And so that obviously is like, one of the things that makes me incredibly proud. But then secondly, it's the systems change work that we're doing. Like, I think our higher education pyramid model is deeply inherently flawed. And then the way that corporate recruiting is built off of that is like a systemic inequity. And if we can change the hearts and minds of large organizations, and it's creating impact, far outside of our reach and grasps. The story that comes to mind is with one of our hiring partners here in New York. Oftentimes, one of our pathways to full-time early career engineering roles is through the internship pathway. And it kind of speaks to your question, Jonathan, around employers seeing our work as charitable acts or investments benefiting their organizations. And I'm certain that Jerelyn and Jessica would agree. Like, we only would partner with the organization if they see the true value in our students as sources of talent that can strengthen the organization. And what comes to mind is an internship at one of our employer partners here in New York. They're a large engineering organization. We had 3 students joined their intern class in 2019, intern class of about 40 technical interns. Pandemic hits after they solidify their intern class. And like most companies, they had to determine whether or not they would cut their internship. They decided to keep their internship, make it virtual, but communicated that the likelihood of conversion it was much lower. Typically, this company, like many, their internship to full-time hiring is like their kind of largest pathway for early engineering talent. So 3 interns out of 40. At the end of the summer, only 8 interns were asked to come back full-time. And of those 8, 3 of them were Marcy Lab School graduates. And that doesn't seem to make sense because they're interning alongside of students who come from the schools that, they're supposed to come from, the Cornells and the UVAs and the NYUs and Columbias of the world. And so those 3 19 and 20-year-olds from the Marcy Lab School beat out their peers from very, very expensive organizations. And that's based on the engineering performance rubric. And so on one hand, it's like, that isn't supposed to happen. On the other hand, when you look a little bit closer and squint your eyes, it's like, oh, this makes a ton of sense. One, the kind of low hanging fruit is the way we're teaching. It's a computer science program, but it's applied. Reverse a linked list, do it in JavaScript, so then you know some React too. The first week of your internship, you can be productive because you've kind of been trained, not just in the theory, but how this stuff is applied in the real world. The curriculum is informed by our partners. So it makes sense that you can begin, working on your first tickets in week 1 or week 2. But there's something deeper than that. It's our students know what this opportunity means for them in a really unique way. It's one thing for their peer who comes from MIT or Carnegie Mellon to intern at this company and go back for their senior year, and their friends say, how was it? And they say, it was fun, it was cool. I think I might use this internship to try to get an offer at Snowflake or Google or Amazon. Whereas our students, like, they recognize the investment that this company has has made in them. They recognize what this role can mean for them and their families, and they work like it. First one's in and the last one's out. Thinking of every single way they can add value to that company because they know what happens for them if this converts. And so through that lens, it's like, yeah, it makes sense why those students converted. And it also makes sense why that company has now hired 10 of our graduates, now making us not the largest supplier of diversity engineering talent for that company, but the largest supplier of early career talent, engineering talent in the company's pipeline. So we're proud of that because if they can hire a Marcy Lab School graduate, they can hire an American Tech and a Knowledge House graduate, a graduate from Morehouse College or Medgar Evers College, because the framework of where talent comes from is now shifted.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And, I started my career as a teacher and, feel like running Camelback allows me to sort of live out my teacher dreams of being able to support folks like yourselves. And I think the benefit of this job is that, oftentimes when you're a teacher, students move on and maybe you stay in touch with a couple of them. But, I think one of the joys of my life and of this job is being able to stay in touch with all of you and be able to see your growth and trajectory over the years. And, Jessica and Jerelyn were in Camelback's very first cohort, back in 2015. And so, I feel like we've been on this journey together, and it's been amazing to watch from up close and also at times from afar, because I know we all have been busy. I think that leads into this next question. I've got 2 more. There's so many programs available to entrepreneurs. Curious for you to talk a little bit about why Camelback for you all, and what impact, if any, has the experience in the organization had on you and your organization?
Yeah. It's interesting because in 2015, when I became a Camelback Fellow, prior to actually applying to this fellowship, I didn't actually find Camelback. Camelback found me. I had a friend actually tell me that there was an organization that was doing an information session in New York City for entrepreneurs and that I should attend and see if I could get into the fellowship. And I was just like, oh yeah, but I'm not an entrepreneur. And she was just like, you are an entrepreneur. You started a nonprofit organization from scratch. And I was just like, no, I am a servant leader. So honestly, there wasn't a direct correlation at the time of me even seeing myself as an education entrepreneur, because one, I never had anyone in my family become an entrepreneur or build something from scratch. And then two, I actually never seen another Latina entrepreneur in my life that was remotely doing the things that I was doing at the time. Obviously, things have changed now that I'm in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, but back in 2015, I saw myself as a servant leader and a technologist. And the work that I was doing with America Tech back then really just came from a place of wanting to serve and bring people opportunity. So this concept of understanding myself as an entrepreneur, I think gave me the ability to apply to Camelback Ventures when someone actually exposed me to the fact that I was one, and it was unimpeachable that I was one. And I think once I got into the Camelback Ventures program, and I, which I would mention, I never even thought I would get in. I'm not an educator by trade. I don't have classroom experience, but what I can tell you is that I've been a young person in the classrooms, right? I'm literally a product of one of the largest school districts in the entire nation that serves over 1 million kids per year in New York City. So though I don't have formal classroom experience, I do know what it's like to be a young person that's often overlooked and underestimated. And I think with the Camelback Ventures program, it gave me the ability to say, oh, wow, there's an organization and a fellowship that is willing to invest $50,000 in an idea that I didn't even think would be what it is today, with staff and offices and programs and, working with brands like Nike and NBCU. Like, I never in a million years would have thought that I'd be here. And I credit my entrepreneurial journey to Camelback Ventures because honestly, I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. Two, I never thought that anyone would give me $50,000 for an idea that I started on the back of Starbucks napkins with my co-founder. And three, I think that out of all of the programs that I've completed for education entrepreneurs in the last 7 years, Camelback Ventures is a reflection of what you would consider a safe space for Black and Brown leaders. Not many of the other nonprofit education entrepreneurship programs I've participated in have had other Black and Latino entrepreneurs in them. Most of them have been, white women or white cis men. And while they are great and they're fantastic, and I know they're really doing great things for the community, I think the lens by which I was able to be a part of the Camelback Ventures program and feel very much a part of the community with people that were sharing a similar trajectory to me, that were proximate to the communities that they were trying to serve, made me feel like it had an ecosystem of support that I can't say has been replicated in other accelerators or incubators I've participated in. So AOT would not have been here without that initial $50,000 investment. And one thing that's not sexy is that people don't want to talk about how important the early injection of cash into organizations have to be in order for them to mature. And so while $50,000 may not feel a lot to people, $50,000 changed the trajectory of our entire organization in the early stages and gave us what we needed in order for me to be able to take on this work full time. So shout out to the team at Camelback and shout out to Aaron for his vision.
I was much later than Jess and Jerelyn. I think you all were like one of the first two. And kind of credit to Aaron and the Camelback team from 2015 to 2019 when I finally did the fellowship. Just like the reputation of Camelback Ventures, it just like skyrocketed. The way I see it, Camelback is like the Y Combinator for any social impact entrepreneur of color. It's like any innovative school model, nonprofit that's led by a woman or a person of color, if you ask them, did you come through Camelback? They'll probably tell you their year or their class. I would go to different education conferences and feel like I'm the only one who doesn't know someone around the table, because a lot of people had gone through a Camelback retreat before. And so I applied once or twice before I finally got in, before they finally let me in. And so I just knew at that point, when this idea was beginning to percolate, Camelback was the first kind of fellowship that I looked to. I thought if I could get into this fellowship, I would have a bit of a roadmap to get in. And Camelback was instrumental, pivotal, for three reasons. One, of course, like Jessica says, I think that the model, Aaron says that it's like they are your friends and family round. I don't have a couple of uncles or cousins who can write $5,000 and $10,000 checks at a time, but that's typically how these things are started. When you think about nonprofit entrepreneurs specifically, it's a special type of person who's going to put in just as much work as you would if you were starting a for-profit business, but with no possibility of an exit, of getting really, really wealthy, And so the people who typically do this are the folks who have access to the types of resources and the safety net that folks like me, that don't. And so yes, the capital, but then two, it's the content. Like, I was a teacher. I was an assistant principal. I didn't know what it meant to raise capital, to build a network of stakeholders, to hire people. And I struggled a lot in the beginning, trying to figure it out for the first time. And I'll never forget, I remember the seat that I was sitting in the one Camelback session where it really clicked, where Aaron and the team helped me to realize that I have as a social entrepreneur, I have three different customer groups. And you're right now, you're only talking to the philanthropists who will fund you, but you're not talking to the companies that will hire your students. You're not even talking to the students who you need to sell to your program. And a set of frameworks that model, I'm sure, what I would get if I went through a business school program, really unlocked the door to a lot of the things that we've done since then. And then lastly, it's the folks, it's the network. I just ran into Jess in San Diego last week. Jerelyn and I sat down with Jerelyn the month that I decided to do this. I sat down in a coffee shop in the Bronx. I was like, Jerelyn, is this crazy? She's like, no, I like this idea. I think you could do it. And that vote of confidence for someone who's done it, who's been in the field, who knows what it's like to be a person of color, raising money from largely white people, who don't necessarily have the proximity to the communities that we're serving. All of those things Jerelyn was able to give me, as an insider. And so, Camelbacks has made, all the difference, really.
For me, I joined Camelback because of the sense of belonging that I just felt. Since I was also in that first cohort, Aaron came to visit me in the Bronx and asked me if I would consider applying. And it was the first time that someone actually reached out to me and was like, I see you. I see what you're trying to do. You're representing the people that you want to serve. You're from the community. And I want to support you. Y'all have to understand that first year, you just hear no, rejection. And Reuben said that Camelback is like the Black and brown white combinator. I used to call Camelback the Black and brown echoing green. Right. And so I applied to Echoing Green that first year that I started the Knowledge House. I didn't get in. Right. I didn't even get feedback about why. And so the fact that Aaron came to me and said, I see you, I want to support you, that means everything. Someone actually giving you a shot. And so I knew that I was going to feel that sense of belonging, especially because I was going to be with other females and people of color that are like-minded, that are mission aligned. And so I think even now, that idea of fellowship, what Reuben said, right now, so many applicants to Camelback reach out on LinkedIn and they're like, please let me know if you have tips on the process. Let me know about your experience. And it's even if those folks don't get in, I'm growing my network and I'm being connected to more and more people that are trying to solve community problems and that look like me. So it's just expanded my network because we all work together. Literally, I was talking to Jess on the phone last week. Reuben said that pre-COVID, we were having coffee together in the Bronx. And so that's what it's about. I have been able to grow my network of POC entrepreneurs in a way that I wouldn't have without Camelback. And so that is everything, especially when you are feeling, okay, I need more people in my support system.
Excellent. I appreciate those kind words, and like you all are Camelback, so thank you. One last question. I know we have a little bit of time left, and one is just to turn it a little bit outward and have us sort of think about like the tech sector itself. And so each of you work to improve DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the tech sector in the variety of ways that you've described. And Snowflake is a leading company in the sector. And so, what advice would you have for companies about identifying, developing, and promoting leaders of color in their organizations?
I can start. So the one thing I'll say is that American Tech does not work on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the technology sector. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is an outcome, but it's not the goal. And I think that that for us, because it's not the goal, it frames our work differently. So you get more diverse leaders, you get more people of color and young women in the tech sector by working with American Tech, but our goal is actually not to diversify your organizations. That is something that you have to be committed to. What we are trying to do is making sure that we train and create a highly trained pipeline of young talent that you will not be able to overlook because their talent actually speaks for itself. And I think that for us, when we think about what advice we can give to companies who are looking to identify, develop, and promote leaders of color in their organization, is to think about this as a long-term play. There are real systems of oppression and real institutionalized systems of oppression that have left Black and Brown specifically people out of the tech sector and the problem doesn't just start at your hiring strategies, it actually starts in the classroom in K through 12, right? And so when you're thinking about, identifying, hiring and promoting, you really have to be thinking about this as a long-term pipeline, from the students that you can be working with in high school, to those that you're working with in college, to those that you'll be working with at alternative colleges, like the places like Marcy Lab School or like the Knowledge House. And for those that are already in your organizations, you have to find a way to see them, you have to find ways to see them, promote them, and retain them. And that for me requires the difference between transparency and authenticity, because transparency is saying, hey, we have a diversity problem, and authenticity is saying, hey, we have a diversity problem, and I think these are the systems internally that we have to dismantle in order for us to create more equitable practices in our hiring, more equitable practices in our training, more equitable practice in the way that we create benchmarks for who gets promoted and who doesn't. And that might require you to rebuild things from scratch. That also requires money. And so if you have a diversity and inclusion budget that only observes $500,000 a year, I would encourage that to become $3 million a year. I would also encourage that your diversity, equity, and inclusion departments are not siloed from HR, and that they have a direct connection to your CEO. And it has to go beyond just getting more people in the door. It's about making sure that once they are in the door, they feel seen, heard, recognized, and that they are also being paid equitably in the process. And so for me, I really see the role of corporations and businesses as change agents in their communities. And once you see yourselves as more than just corporations that are looking to create products and services and thinking about your bottom lines, and more seeing yourselves as employers of people who have real lives outside of your organizations that are fighting for things in their local communities that have nothing to do with your products or services, I think that you will be off to a great start. But those just my inputs. I'm curious to see what Reuben and Jerelyn have to say.
I can go next. I'll offer two pieces of advice, and this gets to the question that's in the Q&A about employers seeing our work as charity cases or like a business case, right? I think like the past 5 years, especially, the private sector has become obsessed with like culture fit. And so it makes students at the Knowledge House and at other programs like it present themselves in a way where it's kind of deficit based, right? Because someone who does not come from a wealthy white background has to figure out what parts of myself do I need to tone down, for example, so that I fit into this company's culture. And I think that if companies really care about DEI, then they're gonna have people of color especially present their whole selves. And if you allow space for that, that person is actually contributing to the culture that you have. And they are improving your culture. They're not fitting into your culture. I think everyone is on the same page about we need to disrupt corporate America so that we are more inclusive of people from these backgrounds. And so there are improvement areas, which means you should be open to your culture changing. And you should be open to allowing people of color who aren't traditionally hired to be a part of that transformational change. And so then you can start being asset-based, right? When people of color who are applying for jobs, when you ask them what makes you unique, tell me how your personal background versus your academic background can, align with our company values, you allow someone to be their whole selves. So that's one. Get rid of culture fit. We're teaching students at the Knowledge House, when you advocate for yourself, you are contributing to someone's culture and making it better. The second thing that I would advise, if we really want to diversify the tech workforce and be inclusive, especially of people that have been traditionally left out, then you can't only hire for senior roles, right? If your company is growing, you must have a need for entry-level talent. You have to remember that the students that are in our programs, they are entering tech careers and they're not going to be eligible for senior engineer roles, right? Furthermore, if you are still asking for folks to have a bachelor's in computer science, then you are only making room for folks that come from four-year colleges to enter your companies. And that is not inclusive. And so we have a lot of companies, they started changing that policy. Slowly but surely, these companies are becoming more inclusive. But that's a start, right? Take out the culture fit rubric that you have for job seekers and ask them what makes you different and how will that contribute to my company, and give entry-level talent a chance. Open up your internship programs. If you don't have one, create transitional employment models like apprenticeship programs, and have junior technologists that can be mentored by your senior staff. But we have to start disrupting traditional hiring practices. And as Jessica said, it needs to start with the companies, because the charities are doing what we can.
Yeah, I would pretty much echo Jessica's sentiment on investing, Jerelyn's sentiment on being aware of bias, and yeah, a story comes to mind of my first year, my first or second year at Duke. I'm going to college where the majority of students don't qualify for financial aid, and they're paying cash for this $60,000 a year institution. And so academically, I feel a fit, but culturally, I feel like a fish out of water. And I remember in one of my economics classes, one of my peers noticed that our economics professor smoked cigarettes after the class. And he walked up to her and asked her if she would like to share a cigar after a class. And like, that's, even to this day, really, like, I can't imagine doing anything like that, like brazen or entitled. Like, who am I to believe that this professor would want to spend time outside of me, let alone while enjoying a tobacco product? But like, he did. And like that, him and that professor were like this. And like, I don't know like what type of opportunities came to him as a result of that relationship with the professor that started with like a cigar after class. But I come from an immigrant household where like the cultural value set is a bit different. Like deference to authority and seniority is like kind of baked into everything we do from childhood. Even now at my old age with a wife and kid, like there's still certain elder circles that I got to get permission to go into. And so then when I think about a conversation with one of our employer partners where the data suggests that on the technical assessments, our students are outperforming, but on the in-person assessment, we're getting feedback about the level of communication. And then like dissecting that, I'm thinking about a 19-year-old student from an immigrant background in a whiteboarding interview with, a 35 or 40-year-old senior engineer. Like there's a part of like your cultural upbringing that says like, who am I to suggest that like I have an opinion about our approach to this problem that might differ from yours? Like culturally, I've been taught to defer to this authority. Therein lies a bias. And it doesn't mean that the model is flawed, but we can identify that in that company. If they're committed to hiring outside of their cultural norm, we can work together to determine how we can best prepare a student to realize that they have a part to play in that dialogue in a technical interview. What happened is that company brought in two people to walk through a technical interview. And that was the first time our students got to see like the natural cadence, the back and forth that happens in a natural whiteboarding interview, giving them permission to like interject, to really make this solving a problem not linear, but a dialogue. And that only happens if a company is willing to search for biases in the hiring process. And typically that only happens if you're willing to partner with the organization that's steeped in it. And so no matter where you're at, there's incredible schools and organizations that are doing this work every single day. And my only other advice would be to partner with those organizations to learn where your process might be falling short, where there's opportunity to create more equity.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing that advice. And those are all the questions I have. I know sometimes people ask me to explain Camelback Ventures, and sometimes what I really want to say is I can show you better than I can tell you. And so I think you all are three amazing and great examples of what Camelback is, and the best explanation of why we do what we do and the impact that it's having on the world. So I just want to say thank you for who you are and your time.